Kieran Maddox didn't look up when the elevator chimed. He didn't have time. The board meeting had run over, his phone was buzzing nonstop, and the marketing team was still waiting for his approval on the quarterly campaign. Love? That wasn't just off the table, it had never even made it into the building. Mr. Maddox, his assistant called, poking her head around the glass door of his corner office. The new intern is here. HR sent her up for the orientation. He barely glanced up. Let Harper handle it. She's sick. And you're the only one not in meetings for the next hour. Kieran sighed and finally looked up, then froze. The girl standing just behind his assistant wasn't what he expected. Not even close. She wasn't dressed like the other interns. She wore a simple navy dress with white sneakers, her dark hair tied back in a messy knot like she hadn't even tried to impress anyone. Her eyes wide, curious, and the exact shade of honey in sunlight met his without flinching. I'm Della Rivers, she said. Nice to meet you, Mr. Maddox. He blinked, taken off guard by the calm confidence in her voice. Most interns stammered through their introductions. Most avoided eye contact. Most definitely didn't make him forget what he was doing. He stood slowly. Kieran. You can call me Kieran. His assistant looked between them, then disappeared with a quiet, good luck. Della stepped into the office, and the moment the door clicked shut behind her, something shifted in the room. Not professionally. Not logically. Just something. I was told I'd be working with the product development team, she said, setting her bag down beside the chair across from his desk. But I'm happy to help wherever I'm needed. He studied her for a beat too long. What school are you coming from? Columbia. Just graduated last month. Business and design dual major. He nodded slowly. Impressive. She gave a small shrug. I'm not great at sitting still. I like building things. Kieran leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. That makes two of us. He wasn't sure why he said that. He didn't usually engage interns. In fact, he barely noticed them. But there was something about her, something steady, something real. It had been a long time since anyone in his orbit felt real. I'll have someone from product loop you in, he said finally. In the meantime, if you're going to be in this building, you need to learn how it runs. Shadow me today. Her eyes lit up. Seriously. Unless you'd rather file spreadsheets. She stood straighter. Nope. I'm in. He didn't smile. Not really. But something about the way he said good made her lips turn up. The rest of the day blurred in a whirlwind of phone calls, department walkthroughs, and quick debriefs, but Della kept pace. She asked questions. She took notes. She even challenged him in front of two senior executives about a product strategy she thought was a little too safe. No one challenged Kieran Maddox. Not unless they wanted to pack up their desk by 5. But instead of firing her, he listened. Then he looked at the team and said, she's right. By the time the sun dipped behind the Manhattan skyline, Della was still sitting in his office, flipping through a product concept binder. You've been here 12 hours, he said, loosening his tie. You trying to beat a record? She looked up, grinning. I didn't come here to make coffee. He chuckled under his breath. Clearly. Just then, his phone buzzed again. Another missed call. Another meeting request. Another investor dinner he didn't want to attend. She glanced toward his phone. You ever take a break? I'm too busy to take breaks. You're too busy to breathe. He lifted a brow. You analyzing me now? No, she said, standing. Just wondering how long you can run at full speed before you crash. She picked up her bag, paused, then looked at him one last time. I like it here, she said. But I'm not trying to be another cog in your machine. I want to build something that matters. Then she walked out, her sneakers making soft sounds against the floor. And for the first time in years, Kieran Maddox didn't pick up his phone. He sat there, watching the door, wondering why the words of a 23-year-old intern had just cracked something wide open in his chest. The next morning, she was already in the office before he arrived. Do you sleep here? He asked, passing her desk. She looked up from her laptop. Do you? He almost smiled. Again. You ready to go over those revised specs? She followed him without hesitation. And from that day forward, she was in every meeting, every brainstorm, every late-night pitch session. She asked the hard questions. She made bold suggestions. And somehow, without warning, she became the one voice in the room he always wanted to hear. A week later, he found himself standing in front of the office cafe. Della, he said, catching her just as she stirred creamer into her coffee. Yeah. You free tonight? Her brows lifted. For what? I've been invited to a dinner with the CEO of Veritech. They're looking to collaborate. I don't want to go alone. She hesitated. You want me to pretend to be your executive assistant or something? No, he said, eyes locking on hers. I want you there as you. She blinked. Are you asking me on a date? He didn't flinch. Would you say yes if I was? She studied him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, she said, I'd say yes. The restaurant had chandeliers the size of cars and a private wine cellar bigger than most apartments. Kieran pulled out her chair, ordered the wine without looking at the menu, and didn't once check his phone. When the Veritech execs left, Della looked at him across the candlelit table. You know, she said, you're not as cold as you pretend to be. He leaned closer. And you're not as unshakable as you act. She rolled her eyes. You don't know me. I'm starting to. She bit her lip, a flicker of nervousness breaking through her usual composure. This is dangerous. Why? Because I don't want to be some story you forget the second I'm not useful anymore. His voice dropped. You're already more than that. They stared at each other for a moment too long. Then she looked away, laughing softly. God, you're intense. Only with you. He drove her home that night in his black Aston Martin, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. Before she got out, she turned to him. I meant what I said, she whispered. I'm not here to blend in. Good, he said quietly. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the moment you walked into my office. She opened the door but didn't step out. Then stop pretending you're too busy to care. Then she was gone. Kieran sat in the car for a long time after that, watching her apartment door, his heart racing like he was 20 again. Like he wasn't the millionaire CEO of a tech empire. Like he didn't have a schedule so full he barely slept. He was too busy to love. Until now. The following Monday, Della caught her reflection in the mirrored elevator doors and barely recognized herself. Not because her outfit had changed, she still wore the same practical flats and pinstripe trousers, but because something in her eyes had. There was a current behind them now, like the world had tilted slightly and she was still finding her balance. The doors parted on the top floor, and she stepped into the quiet hallway lined with oil paintings and glass partitions. Just past the reception desk, Kieran stood with his jacket slung over one shoulder, murmuring something low to a man in a tailored navy suit. His profile was sharp, unreadable, focused. But the moment he saw her, his words faded. He handed off his tablet without breaking eye contact. Walk with me, he said as she approached. She fell into step beside him, matching his long strides. You're early, he said. So are you. I never left. She looked sideways at him. That's not healthy. Neither is letting someone else decide what you're capable of. That caught her off guard. Are you talking about me or you? Both. They stepped into the boardroom, but instead of heading for the main table, he led her to a side door she hadn't noticed before. It opened to a private viewing lounge facing the skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. I come here when I need to think, he said, motioning to a leather sofa facing the city. Sit. She did, unsure of what this was. A meeting? A test? He remained standing, one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the back of the sofa. I know you're wondering why I brought you to dinner last week. She folded her hands in her lap. I assumed you wanted an extra brain in the room. That was part of it. But not the reason. He paused, looking out at the spires of downtown Manhattan. I've built this company from nothing. I've sacrificed for it. Time, people, relationships. His voice was quiet. I thought that was the price of success. And now I don't know what I'm building toward anymore. She didn't speak. She could feel the weight of what he wasn't saying. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. You're not like anyone I've ever worked with. You don't care about protocol. You don't try to impress. You just are. She met his gaze without flinching. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. Their eyes locked, and for a moment neither moved. Then the door creaked open behind them. Mr. Maddox, the investors from Singapore are here. He didn't look away. Give me 5 minutes. The door shut again. Della stood. I should get back to the floor. He caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to stop her. The contact was brief, but it sent something wild through her chest. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I just want to know if I'm the only one feeling this. Her breath caught. You're not. He let her go. That week passed in a blur of acceleration. Product pitches, interdepartmental reviews, and a surprise acquisition meeting that had everyone scrambling. Della found herself fielding questions from senior staff, sitting in on calls with international partners, even presenting a revised concept pitch to the development team on Kieran's personal recommendation. But it wasn't just the professional momentum that had shifted. Late Wednesday night, she stayed behind to finish a prototype presentation. The office was nearly empty, city lights bleeding through the tall windows. She didn't hear him come in. You skipped dinner, he said, setting a takeout container beside her laptop. She looked up, startled. You didn't have to do that. I didn't. I wanted to. She opened the container slowly, the scent of garlic and roasted vegetables filling the room. Do you always take care of your employees like this? Only the ones who never ask for anything. She picked up a fork. Maybe I should start. He sat across from her, rolling up his sleeves. What would you ask for? She didn't answer right away. I don't know. Maybe a day where I don't feel like I'm walking a tightrope. You think I make you feel that way? I think you make me feel everything. He didn't deny it. I keep trying to stay focused, she said, her voice lower. But then you walk into the room and it's like something breaks loose inside me. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but unshakable. Then stopped trying to fight it. Their eyes locked again, and this time, neither of them looked away. That Friday, the annual company gala loomed, a black tie event hosted at an exclusive rooftop venue overlooking the East River. Della hadn't planned to go. She didn't own anything remotely appropriate, and the idea of making small talk with executives in tuxedos made her skin crawl. But Thursday night, a package arrived at her door. No note, no card. Just a midnight blue designer gown folded in tissue paper and a pair of silver heels tucked underneath. The dress hugged her waist, flared at the hips, and looked like it cost more than her college tuition. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. The next night, she stepped out of a town car arranged by an anonymous sender, though she knew exactly who had sent it, and into a world of champagne flutes, string quartets, and rooftop fire pits. Kieran found her before she'd even crossed the terrace. His tuxedo was tailored within an inch of perfection. His dark hair combed back, but his eyes were the same steady, direct, impossible to ignore. You look. His words caught. Beautiful doesn't cover it. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted you here, and I didn't want you to feel like you didn't belong. I already do, she said softly. He held out his hand. Dance with me. I'm not great at it. Neither am I. She hesitated, then slid her hand into his. The music shifted into something slow and sweeping, and they moved to the center of the floor. He held her close, his hand resting against the small of her back like it belonged there. I haven't done this in years, he murmured near her ear. Danced? Let someone in. She exhaled slowly. Then we're both out of practice. They moved together like gravity had shifted around them. The world melted into music and city lights, and for the first time in her life, Della forgot to be cautious. Later, as the night wound down, he led her to a quieter section of the rooftop beneath a canopy of string lights. The skyline glowed behind them, the air crisp with early spring. I should probably say goodnight, she said, unsure if she wanted to. You could, he said, stepping closer. Or you could let me tell you something first. She tilted her head slightly. What? I haven't been able to think straight since the day you walked into my office. Kieran. I thought I had everything I wanted. But it turns out none of it matters if I don't have you. Her breath caught. I know this is fast. I know there's risk. But I'm not letting fear dictate what I do anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her entire body stilled. I don't want an assistant. I don't want an intern. I want you. With me. In everything. He opened the box, a diamond ring, delicate and luminous, catching the light like a promise. The sound of the city faded behind them. I'm not asking you to leave what makes you you, he said. I'm asking you to share the rest of it with me. She stared at the ring, then back at him, heart thundering in her chest. Yes, she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, it wasn't rushed or hungry, it was grounding, certain, like choosing a future instead of just running from the past. They stood there beneath the lights, wrapped in something that felt terrifyingly permanent. Neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. Della woke to sunlight pouring through the tall windows of her apartment, her hand resting on the soft velvet box still on her nightstand. The ring on her finger caught the morning light like it had been waiting to be found her whole life. It didn't feel real. Not the rooftop skyline, not the quiet way Kieran had said her name before slipping the ring onto her finger, not even the way her heart had steadied under his touch like it had finally recognized home. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment before swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. There was no time to daydream. Not now. Not today. Because now she wasn't just the intern with sharp ideas and a bold tongue. Now she was the woman engaged to the man at the helm of Maddox Innovations, and the world didn't take kindly to a woman who climbed fast without warning. By the time she walked into the office, the shift had already begun. People glanced up. Conversations paused just a second too long. Someone from HR passed her in the hallway and offered a tight, unreadable nod. She stopped short of Kieran's office, took a deep breath, and knocked once. "Come in." He was by the window, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw her, he ended the call without finishing his sentence. "I didn't want to wait outside," she said. "Some people already know. They're going to find out anyway." "I know." He walked toward her, not with hesitation but with the same unshakable calm that had unnerved her from the beginning. "I'll handle it." She shook her head. "I don't want you shielding me from backlash." "I'm not shielding you. I'm making it clear you're not here because of me. You earned your place long before I ever touched you." She swallowed. "That's not what people will say." "I don't give a damn what they say." "I do." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then let's make a plan. We finish this quarter, we close the Veritech partnership, and then you launch your design initiative. On record. With your name attached." She blinked. "You'd give me that?" "I'm not giving you anything. You've already built it. I'm just clearing the runway." Her eyes searched his. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just one condition." She waited. "When we walk into that boardroom next month, I want them to know exactly who they're dealing with." Her throat tightened. "And who is that?" He brushed a thumb along her jaw. "The woman I'm betting everything on." That afternoon, she presented her prototype revisions to the executive team. No one interrupted her. No one dismissed her. And when she finished, Kieran didn't say a word. He just looked around the room and said, "This is the future of the company. Get on board or get out of the way." The silence that followed was electric. But with visibility came scrutiny. 2 days later, an article appeared in a business gossip column. A blurry photo of Kieran and Della at the gala, heads close, her hand on his chest. The headline was brutal. "Maddox's new protege or new mistress?" Della saw it during her commute. Her stomach twisted. She didn't cry. She didn't even call him. She simply walked into the office, printed the article, and dropped it on his desk. He looked up from his laptop, expression unreadable. "I'm not ashamed of us," she said. "But I'm not going to be your scandal either." His eyes darkened. "You think I see you that way? I think we underestimated what this would cost." He stood slowly. "Let me handle it." "No." Her voice was firm now, steady even as her heart pounded. "If we're going to do this, really do this, I need to stand on my own." He looked at her for a long moment and for once didn't argue. That night, she called a friend from Colombia who worked at a digital media startup. They met for drinks, and by the end of the evening, Della had arranged a feature piece, the intern who rewired the Maddox machine. She didn't mention the engagement. She didn't name Kieran. She talked about innovation, disruption, and rebuilding systems from the inside. It went viral in under 24 hours. When she walked into the office the next day, the air had changed again. This time, no one looked away. They looked up. Kieran waited in her workspace with 2 coffees and a quiet smile. "You didn't tell me about the article," he said. "I didn't think I had to." He handed her a cup. "You didn't." That weekend, they left the city. Kieran drove them upstate in a charcoal gray McLaren, the kind of car that made strangers do double takes at intersections. The windows were down, the air crisp, and for once, neither of them said much. They stopped at a sprawling estate tucked behind tall hedges and dense trees, a private vineyard that Kieran had invested in early in his career. "It's off-grid," he said, unlocking the heavy cedar front door. "No staff. No cameras. Just us." She wandered through the space, slowly exposed beams, stone fireplaces, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books instead of awards. He watched her take it in. You needed silence, he said. I didn't know I did. They spent the afternoon walking the rows of dormant vines, snow still clinging to the shaded patches of soil. She asked about how he'd found the place, and he told her about a weekend he'd spent here after his mother died. It was the first time he'd spoken about her. She used to say I was born chasing something, he said. I just never figured out what. And now, I'm starting to think it wasn't something. It was someone. That night, they cooked pasta together in the open kitchen. She burned the garlic. He forgot to salt the water. It didn't matter. After dinner, she curled against him on the oversized sofa, the fire crackling low. I still don't know how this ends, she whispered, fingers brushing the inside of his wrist. Then don't try to write the ending yet. I'm not used to this. Neither am I. She turned her face into his shoulder. I'm scared. He kissed her temple. So am I. They didn't sleep much. But not because they were distracted by each other. They were too busy letting their guard down. The next morning, she found him barefoot in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone while drinking orange juice straight from the bottle. You're a billionaire, she said, arms crossed. And you drink juice like a frat boy. He grinned. I don't let money change the important stuff. She raised a brow. Like your questionable hygiene? He walked past her, catching her around the waist mid-step and lifting her off the ground. I could buy the building you live in, he murmured. You already did. Then maybe I should evict you. Just to see if you'd come stay with me. Her eyes danced. You'd miss me after one night. He didn't deny it. They stayed one more day before heading back to the city. On the drive home, Kieran took a detour through the hills, pulling the car off a narrow road to a bluff overlooking a frozen lake. He stepped out, walked around to open her door, and held out his hand. This is where I want to build the next lab, he said. Not in a skyscraper, not in a glass box, but here, where people can think. She looked at the view, the endless sky above the rolling hills. You're serious. I'm always serious. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to help me design it. Her breath caught. You're not asking. You're offering. No, he said, eyes on hers. I'm inviting. She didn't answer. Not with words. She just leaned in and kissed him, slow and certain, like she finally believed it. When they returned to the city, their roles didn't change. She still presented at meetings. He still challenged her in closed-door sessions. But behind the glass, behind the power and pace, something had shifted. They weren't playing games anymore. They were building something. And it wasn't just a company. The elevator opened on the executive floor. But this time, no one murmured or glanced sideways when Della stepped out. She moved with quiet confidence, the subtle glint of her engagement ring catching light as she slid her access badge into the glass doors of the strategy wing. The whispers had stopped, not because people had forgotten, but because she had proven herself again, and again until doubt no longer had a foothold to cling to. Inside, Kieran stood at the edge of the long conference table, arms folded as he reviewed layouts for the new upstate lab campus. The architectural renderings were spread across the dark walnut surface, anchored by a sleek black tablet and a half-empty espresso cup. He didn't look up when she entered. Tell me what you think about moving the design lab to the east quadrant, he said. It gets better morning light. She stepped beside him, scanning the blueprints. That would mean pushing the server farm to the west side. More shade, less heat impact. Smart. He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. You slept. 4 hours. You. 3. She reached for a pen, circling a section on the schematic. This wall, why not make it glass? Let the engineers see the land they're innovating on. He watched her as she worked, and something in his chest tightened in the best possible way. You're not what I expected when you walked into my office, he said. I know. I thought you'd challenge me, maybe annoy me. I didn't think you'd change everything. She set the pen down. You didn't change. You just stopped hiding. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. There's a press dinner tomorrow night, he said. Investors, media heads, a few government advisors. High profile. I want you there. Her brow lifted. As your fiancé or your business partner? Both. She didn't hesitate. Then I'll need a seat at the table. Not beside you, across. You'll have it. The next evening, the ballroom at the Della Hotel shimmered with chandeliers and silk panels. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays. The air buzzed with money and speculation. Della arrived in a tailored black jumpsuit with an asymmetric neckline, her hair pulled back to expose a bold gold cuff at her throat. No one mistook her for arm candy. She didn't linger by Kieran's side, didn't wait for introductions. She shook hands with investors, debated clean tech funding with a senator's aide, and dissected integration models with the head of a research lab in Oslo. Kieran watched her from across the room. Sebastian Langston, a venture capitalist who had once tried to buy Kieran's company during a vulnerable year, stepped beside him. "She's a force," Sebastian said, nodding toward Della. "You always did know how to spot value before the rest of us." Kieran didn't look away from her. "She's not value. She's vision." Sebastian laughed, clapping him on the back. That's the sound of a man who finally got his priorities straight. Later, as the dinner wound down, Della joined Kieran near the terrace doors. "You're leaving without saying goodbye to the senator," she said. "He'll survive. I wanted air." She followed him outside, the chill night air a welcome contrast to the heat of the ballroom. The city spread below them, glittering and alive. "I saw the way you looked at Sebastian," she said. "I was remembering the time he tried to poach my CTO with a bottle of scotch and a private jet. You didn't look angry. You looked amused." "I'm not threatened anymore." She turned toward him. "By what?" "Losing what matters." He brushed a hand along her jaw. "Because I know now that what matters doesn't leave. It builds with you. It fights beside you. It tells you when your idea is stupid and then makes it better." She leaned into his touch. "I'm not going anywhere. I know." The next morning, she met with the foundation director of a tech education nonprofit. She'd been quietly developing a plan to integrate Maddox resources into underserved high schools' curriculum, mentorships, even mobile labs. Kieran joined halfway through. The director, a woman named Raina, leaned forward. "You're really serious about this?" Della nodded. "It's not charity. It's investment. These kids are the next generation of innovators. They just need access." Kieran added, "And a company that refuses to invest in the future is a company already dying." By the end of the meeting, a pilot program was sketched and a 6-figure donation pledged. As they left the building, Della glanced at him. "You didn't ask questions. You just backed me. I read the proposal 3 nights ago. It was airtight. You trust me that much?" He stopped at the car door, turning to face her. "I trust you more than I trust myself." That evening, she returned to her apartment to pack a few things. The lease was up soon, and they'd agreed without ever really saying it that she'd move into Kieran's penthouse. Not because he insisted, because it felt inevitable. Inside, the space felt smaller somehow, or maybe she had grown bigger than it. Not in ego, but in purpose. In presence. She was halfway through folding sweaters when her phone buzzed. Kieran's voice was clipped when she picked up. "There's something I need you to see." Half an hour later, she stepped into the Maddox building's private rooftop garden, a space few employees even knew existed. String lights were coiled through the stone archways. A long table sat beneath a canopy set for 2 with flickering candles and a bottle of her favorite wine already breathing. She turned to him. "What is this?" "I wanted to finish something I never started properly." He walked to the table, picked up a small velvet box, not the same one. This was smaller, square, wrapped in a silver ribbon. "I gave you a ring on a rooftop under string lights. It was perfect." "It was," she agreed. "But I never told you why." She said nothing. He opened the box. Inside was a single gold key. "To the new lab site?" she asked, confused. "No," he said softly. "To the brownstone on West 74th. The one with the bay windows and the garden gate. The one you paused in front of last month." She blinked. "You bought it. I'm not building a life in glass towers anymore. I want somewhere real. For us." She reached for the key, her fingers trembling. "I don't need a house to prove anything," she said. "I know. But I wanted to give you permanence. Not just a ring. A place where we can argue about where to put the bookshelves and burn pancakes on Sunday mornings. A place that no headline can touch." She looked up at him, and for once words failed her. He stepped closer. "You melted every wall I spent years building. You stepped into my world, and instead of shrinking to fit it, you made your own space and demanded I meet you there." She laughed softly. "That sounds like me. I thought I had to wait until everything was perfect to let someone in. Until the company was stable. Until the past stopped haunting me. Until I wasn't too busy. And now I know love doesn't wait for perfect. It just asks you to show up." He reached for her hand, curling her fingers around the key. I'm showing up. She looked at the key, then at him. Then I guess we're home. He leaned in and kissed her. The city humming below them, the future wide open. They didn't rush back downstairs. They stayed in the garden long after the candles burned low, talking about the paint color for the upstairs office, the possibility of adopting a dog, and the idea of hosting a small dinner for the team once the brownstone was ready. Not as CEO and intern. Not even as fiancé and fiancée. Just as two people who finally understood what it meant to build something that mattered. Together. The brownstone on West 74th looked different in spring. The ivy had started to climb again, cautiously curling around the wrought iron gate, and the cherry tree in the small front garden had exploded in soft pink blossoms that fluttered down like confetti every time the wind passed through. It was the kind of street people paused to admire, the kind that felt like it existed just slightly outside of time. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon oil and new paint. The bookshelves had been finished, the kitchen fully stocked, and the upstairs office was complete with two desks, one with a sleek ultra-wide monitor and the other cluttered with sketchpads, fabric swatches, and a half-empty mug of tea. Della stood barefoot in the middle of the front room, her arms crossed loosely, watching the late morning sunlight stretch across the hardwood floors. A delivery van had just left, bringing the last of the custom furniture she'd helped design. Everything in the space felt deliberate. Nothing was decorative for the sake of being seen. It was a house meant to be lived in, not displayed. Kieran stepped in from the back hallway, still on a call, his tie undone and his expression sharp with focus. I need the prototype specs by Thursday, he said as he passed her, catching her waist briefly with his free hand. No, I don't care if it's aggressive. That's the point. She leaned against the doorframe, amused as his voice faded into the next room. He returned a few minutes later, rolling his shoulders. They'll hit the deadline, he said. Or I'll redesign the damn thing myself. Della arched a brow. You're not allowed to go back to doing everything alone. That was the deal. I'm delegating. Mostly. She walked over, looping her arms around his waist. You know, for a man who used to live in penthouses with glass walls and silent hallways, you've adjusted to street noise and creaky stairs pretty well. He kissed her forehead. I've adjusted to you. Everything else was easy. They sat on the couch after lunch, reviewing the latest drafts of the education partnership rollout. She'd taken the lead on the initiative, and the pilot program had already been greenlit for expansion into 5 more schools. Kieran handed her a tablet. The board signed off on the funding increase. They're calling it a long-term investment in community innovation. She looked at him. Is that what you told them? No. I told them if they didn't back it, I'd pull the Maddox name off the company and start over with someone smarter. Her mouth parted slightly. You didn't. I did. And they still approved it? They saw the numbers. More importantly, they saw you. She leaned back, letting that settle. You really don't care what they say about us anymore, do you? I care about results. And I care about you. The rest is noise. That evening, they hosted their first dinner in the new house. Not a gala, not a press event, just a small gathering of people who had stood by them while the world speculated, dissected, and judged. Harper arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and a bag of gourmet chocolates. Raina from the education nonprofit came with her teenage niece, who had just been accepted into Columbia. A few members of the Maddox design team showed up in jeans and sneakers, and no one mentioned quarterly projections or product roadmaps. They filled the house with laughter, with music, with arguments over whether the lasagna needed more cheese. No one asked for a tour. No one took photos. It was the first time in months Della felt like she was simply a person again, not a headline or a strategy. After everyone left, she stood in the doorway, looking out over the quiet street. Kieran came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You were right, she said. About what? That we needed somewhere real. This feels like ours. He rested his chin on her shoulder. It is. They spent the next few weeks slipping into something that felt dangerously close to peace. Not the absence of hard work, but the presence of balance. They still argued. She still called him out for pushing too hard. He still told her when she was overthinking. But none of it was about distance. Every disagreement pulled them closer, made them sharper, more in sync. One evening, she stayed late at the design lab, finalizing specs for a modular classroom model. When she finally returned home, the house was lit with warm light and something smelled like rosemary and butter. She stepped into the kitchen to find Kieran in jeans and a button-down, barefoot, plating what looked like homemade gnocchi. "You cooked," she said, stunned. He glanced over his shoulder. "I have hidden talents." "Since when?" "Since watching you try to survive on yogurt and crackers during your last deadline sprint." She laughed, setting down her bag. "You're full of surprises." He handed her a glass of wine. "One more." She set the wine down without sipping. "What now?" He led her out to the back garden, still modest, still a work in progress. But tonight it had been transformed. String lights hung between the trees, and a low table sat in the middle of the grass, surrounded by pillows. She looked at him. "You did all this. Tonight. I had help. But yes. Why?" He took both her hands. "Because I never gave you a proper engagement dinner. No cameras. No investors. No pressure. You already gave me the ring." "I gave you a ring," he said. "Now I want to give you a promise." She looked into his eyes, and the rest of the world vanished. "I promise," he said, "that no matter how chaotic things get, I will always come back to this. To us. To the life we're building. You are the only thing I've ever been sure of." Her throat tightened. "You already have me. I know. But I want you to know that I see you, every version of you. The dreamer. The fighter. The woman who walked into my office and rewrote my future without even trying." She stepped closer, her eyes shimmering. "I never wanted to change you." "You didn't," he said. "You just reminded me who I really was." They ate in the garden under the stars, the air soft with the coming summer. Afterward, they lay on the grass, her head on his chest, counting the seconds between the distant sounds of traffic and the quiet rustle of leaves overhead. A week later, she stood at the podium at the first full launch of the Maddox Futures Initiative. Hundreds of students, educators, and community leaders gathered in the newly renovated downtown learning center. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the program's slogan, "Design the Future." "Don't wait for it." She looked out at the crowd, then down at Kieran in the front row. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His pride was tangible. When she finished her speech, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. But it wasn't the applause that made her breath catch. It was the way he stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, like she was the only thing that mattered in the room. Afterward, as they slipped away from the crowd, she pulled him into a quiet hallway. "I want this to keep growing," she said. "Not just the program. Us. We will. Even when things get hard? Especially then." She kissed him, slow and certain. Months passed and the company changed with them. Not in image, but in substance. The culture shifted. Innovation became more human-centered. Employees started pitching ideas from the ground up. And through it all, Della remained at the center, not as a symbol, but as a catalyst. They traveled sometimes. Not to escape, but to reset. A weekend in Kyoto. A week in the Dolomites. A long, rainy stay in the Scottish Highlands where they read books and argued about whether the fireplace or the view was the best part of the cottage. One evening in autumn, Kieran came home to find her on the floor of the study, sketching something on a large sheet of linen paper. "What are you making?" She looked up. "A new kind of workspace. For kids who learn by doing. No desks. No whiteboards. Just tools, light, and space to move." He sat beside her without hesitation. "Show me." She did. And he listened. And then, when the sketch was finished, he pulled her into his lap, kissed her temple, and whispered, "We were never too busy to love. We just hadn't built the right life yet." And they had. Together.